I've hit castle, now what? At the start of my feudal guide video, I stated that Age of Empires is a game of decisions. As you hit castle, you soon realize that Age of Empires 4 is also a game of evolution. The game plays different in each phase of the game. If you read people's thoughts online, you often hear players talk about how castle and imperial are too difficult and basically just play in feudal. I understand that feeling. Feudal is a much more direct game. You can follow a build order that helps you control the first 6 minutes of the game and get into a good position. Castle and Imperial after it are much more chaotic. The goals are different, and how you need to respond are based so heavily on the context of the match and the matchup that's really hard to have a direct step-by-step guide, making it a whole new level of learning people have to master, which can be very difficult. It is also just a more complex version of the game. There's more to multitask, there's more to do, and it becomes a huge strain. Lastly, it's hard to practice Castle and Imperial. Feudal, you can hop into a game with an AI and rep your opening again and again. How do you rep hitting castle right as your opponent attacks you? How do you rep hitting castle as your opponent goes 2TC? Unless you have a practice partner, you really can't, leaving people the only way to learn by doing, which can feel awful if you're getting your ass kicked constantly. What I want to do is go over the broad possibilities you're facing as you hit castle, as well as some common goals you should have as you fight in castle. The goal of the video should give you things to work towards to give you actions and purpose, help you to create a plan, and thus execute at a higher level. Anyone can play in castle, it just requires the tools and the ideas. As always, a lot of what I teach today will be modified by your civ and strategy. As you hear the options and goals of castle, consider your civ's favorite strategy, strengths, and weaknesses, and how that affects the information. Before I jump in, I do want to remind you to please like and subscribe. It is huge for your channel my size, for the visibility, and getting more people to watch, so I really appreciate it. If you're interested in getting more support on learning AoE 4, or looking for a community where you can ask questions and get support, I highly suggest you join my coaching Discord. Link is in the description below. Alright, let's jump in. First, let's talk through some general situations where you end up in castle and how to respond. We'll then touch upon some common questions I get as a coach about Castle Age, as well as some general goals you should have. As always, scouting is important. I will often give you some general ways to react, but that heavily depends on you knowing what the opponent is doing. So scouting and figuring out what they are doing is vital. I would say the coaching advice I give the most is scout your opponent all game to see what they are doing so you can react correctly. First, fast castle, which I would consider aging up under 8 minutes. Fast castling is when you choose to try to go to age 3, castle age, as fast as possible, often skipping upgrades and not making units in feudal. People do this often for two main reasons. The civilization they're playing has a power spike in castle from the bonuses they receive. Examples of this include the HRE fast castle into Regnitz to get relics, which gives them a massive eco boost, and Japanese fast castle into Floating Gate, which gives you your Shiros, which you put into stables, and now you can quickly produce samurai. You then raid with them while getting relics. Even if the civilization does not have a unique castle bonus, just getting better units and grabbing the relics are often seen as bonuses worth rushing castle for. General goals of fast castle. First, to grab relics using religious units, which provide free gold, on average around 2 to 3 villagers worth per relic. To raid with knights and or men-at-arms. This can often lead to a timing push, where you try to attack with castle units with a few rams and mangonels to kill the opponent before they get to castle themselves, or as they are entering castle. Secure map control with stone walls and keeps, with goal of taking the game long and securing more resources, effectively starving the opponent out. And lastly, some civs then try to rush Imperial, with a similar goal of trying to get even better units to win a big fight with quality over quantity. Situation-specific responses to opponents. Opponent is feudal pushing you. This is often seen as a counter to fast castle. When an opponent notices you hit feudal and are rushing castle, they will make units and push. If they can push you off gold and prevent food, even if you have hit castle, it can often end the game. If you want to know how to respond in feudal, check my feudal guide video. We are going to here focus on what to do if you hit castle while being pushed. Your response. As you age up, pick the units you're going to spam to push the opponent back. You want these units to be gold units generally, so you don't have to waste gold upgrading feudal units. You generally have 3 options. Knights. Best if the opponent is pushing you with knights, horsemen, men-at-arms, or archers, as castle knights counter all of those. Men-at-arms. Best if your opponent is pushing you with spears and archers, since feudal spears can do work against knights. If the opponent has a lot of ranged, you might need to grab a mangonel, or wait till you can get a mass of units, as feudal archers can still kill castle units in large numbers, such as 30 or greater. As I've stated before in my video on defense, the key is to wait as long as possible to push out. Your opponent's feudal units can beat your castle units in small number. To delay your opponent, use your first units to cut off reinforcements if they are knights. Men-at-arms, this would be tougher. You can also use knights to charge and hit rams and run back, destroying the rams to buy you more time. You can do a similar strategy with men-at-arms, where the men-at-arms run out just to kill the rams. usually protecting the tower, while the tower attacks any units that walk up to attack the men-at-arms. Once you have pushed back opponents, you need to try to do damage, as their best bet is to rush castle themselves. You then have a timing to do lots of damage, potentially win the game as they try to hit castle. If they hit castle successfully, the game becomes then a normal game at that point. Opponent is 2TC. In this case, the opponent is betting they can out-economy you and survive your initial castle push. Opponents will use your castle rush to put their second TC on resources, then wall up and get spears to slow a push and stop knights, the most common unit people make while fast castling. One thing to try to do is to use your scout to block a wall, but then where the wall is being built, and tell them to stand ground. You can also try rushing up a stable and sending a horseman or two to stop wall building, but that can slow your castle rush. Your response. 1. Get relics, as this is a natural way to make up for the villager difference of a second TC. Raid with knights. You will have to micro them carefully as your opponent will have spears, but castle knights can fight feudal spears in similar number. One key micro tip is to split your knights as you enter the opponent's base. If your opponent attack move their spears, then they will chase one knight while the others will be free to raid. Remember, just the presence of your knights does damage, as your opponent will keep villagers garrisoned or off resources far away from TC. So don't just throw them under the TC and have them die, keep trying to move them around and make your opponent have to react. It is a great idea to splurge on getting arrow defense ASAP as you age up, both level 1 and level 2. Men-at-arms and knights will, with arrow defense, last so much longer into TC, and makes for a great way to shut down the opponent's eco. Being able to kill villagers and slow the opponent's castle here is key. Once you have relics, you have to make a decision. 1. Push with 1 TC. This is generally done if you have slowed the opponent's castle and have killed a lot of villagers. To stop them from getting back in, you put immediate pressure and attack to win the game. A smart switch is often the men-at-arms, or you can mass archers, as the opponent will be massing spears to stop your knights. Go for your own second TC. You want to rush the TC, getting it ASAP, and to drop it on resources. This will allow you to match eco, and with relics even surpass them. You will then play it like a normal game. This is generally done if you've gotten to relics and haven't done a ton of damage and want to be on the safe side. Rush Imperial, generally only done if your civilization gets a power spike from Imperial in some way, such as HRE's Palace of Swabia or Ottoman's Great Bombards, because by nature, you're giving your opponent time to catch up, make units, and push you themselves. Opponent also rushes castle. The game becomes a knight battle over the relics. Since you are both relatively in the same place, you then want the relics to give you a boost. Knights make the most sense to make, as they allow map control, raiding, and sniping religious units. It's helpful to try to wall or put down towers, but keep making knights. After the relic battle is over, it's basically a normal game, and a transition to spears or crossbow would be good. But early on, if you do spears and crossbows early, your opponent can just outrun you with knights, raid your eco, and just slow you down. Going castle after a feudal fight. There are 2 variations to this, one where you are attacking and are ahead, and one where you are behind. Going castle when you are ahead. How can I tell if I'm ahead? This means you have pushed your opponent and they are stuck in their base. You have cut off resources and they're being defensive towers and units. You might then decide to go castle to make your finishing push more successful. The danger of this is you're giving your opponent more time to break out, wall up, make units, etc. At the same time, going castle while ahead can be a great way to make your push successful, as your army can be upgraded to veteran castle army, and you can also start to add in castle units. It is vital that you do not attack while you are going castle. Losing your army can be game ending. Instead, stay in front of your opponent's base, raid with a few units to keep them busy. When you hit castle, they may try to break out and attack, as this means you have spent 1,800 resources on aging up that they have potentially put into units. If your opponent pushes out, it is okay to back up. Save your army till your upgrades kick in. Once you age up and your upgrades kick in, attack. Add the units that will help you out, such as a mangonel if the opponent has lots of archers, or going mass men-at-arms. If you want to be super safe, you can just go trebuchets and work the opponent's base down from a distance. It is also important that while you are pushing, you are doing safety measures in case the attack fails. This includes dropping a monastery to grab relics and take sacred sites for extra gold in a win condition, so you can just back up and hold sacred sites if you need to. Walling your economy to prevent raids from slowing you down. Add a second TC to help grow your eco. Gathering stone for keeps and better walls. Do not need a lot of stone, maybe 5 to 8 at first to start the trickle. Gathering stone for keeps and better walls. You do not need a lot of villagers on stone, maybe 5 to 8 at first to start the trickle. The key is, the safety measures should not come at the expense of your push and aggression. If your APM is low, do each measure one at a time, preferably in the order I typed them. I have lost plenty of games going too heavy into keeps, or stopping to put up the perfect set of walls and farms. Keeps mean less units, and losing aggression might open up space for an opponent to wall and set up an eco in a place you had previously cut off. The safety measures are more of if you just end up losing a push for some reason, they are a fallback, but you don't want to lose because of them. Going castle while behind. This includes fighting in feudal and being pushed back to base, or focusing more on eco, such as going second TC while your opponent is aggressive. In this case, castle is the way you get back into the game by gaining units that are more powerful and tips the balance back against your opponent. First, it is vital you set yourself up for success while going castle. Wall up your flanks to stop raids and secure resources, tower vital resources like gold, and pick a unit to spam, either men-at-arms or knights are usually the best choice for tankiness. If the opponent is all ranged, a mangonel could be a game saver. As you age up, get a lot on wood and gold. You'll need 300 for Siege Workshop and 400 wood for a mangonel itself, and 200 gold. Make sure the workshop is in the back of the base so it doesn't get sniped. Age up, rush up a Siege Workshop, and make the mangonel. Have men-at-arms created to body block and protect the mangonel. A few hits will often scare opponents away. Once you survive your opponent's initial push as you hit castle, the follow-up can be what swings the game for you. Send units to resources all over the map in small numbers. Men-at-arms are great for this since they are so tanky. 2 men-at-arms in a wood line or on a hunt can kill villagers and stop their eco even with towers. Your goal is to shut down the opponent's eco. It does not matter if you lose these units, just slow down your opponent. As your opponent huts down men-at-arms, send villagers out to resources to supercharge your eco and wall up to protect what you can. Grab relics. After the initial eco hunt, switch into a comp that is better set up, like men-at-arm crossbows, crossbow spear, or knight archer for the actual game-winning push. If the opponent hits castle during this time, scout to see what they are going for. Be careful about overcommitting, as they will start to get their own castle units, and you could lose via the defender's advantage if you push too much. With map control, you can wall, secure resources, and start gathering stone for keeps if the game starts to stalemate. Overall, the goals of Castle Age. As Castle Age goes on, there are a few things you should try to do to increase your chances of winning, either in Late Castle or Imperial. Often the actions you take set yourself up for success. The multitasking at this point can be killer, so if you need to, set up a list and try to do each one at a time as you continue to fight, balance your eco, and raid your opponent. I get a lot of questions on multitasking. It's just straight up reps. But repetitions that are purposeful, making sure you're trying to do the right things every time. Some things you should try to do during Castle. 1. Completely wall off the base. Castles when knights and horsemen raids, even men-at-arm raids, can be killer. You are often on resources outside the TC range, and even a tower won't stop these raids. Wood walls buy you time to pull villagers back, and move units to reinforce. 2. Grab relics. Relics seem small at first, but the person who gets them gets permanent gold, and over time that is worth a lot. In Imperial, you can get the upgrade Tithe Barns, which really juices those relics. They are also just as important to grab so your opponent doesn't have them. Pick your spot for farms. Try to keep farms together to make them easier to defend. Pick a spot in the back of the base that is hard for opponents to get to, then protect with walls and to keep. Get stone and add stone walls. These ensure that your opponent cannot rush you with cavalry, such as doing a quick burn and rush in. Stone wall the area near farms first, then work across the map. Drop keeps on central resources. Securing central gold is vital for long-term success. People who secure central resources tend to win the game in Imperial just from your opponent running out of resources. And lastly, improve your eco. It is common to add more TCs in Castle, especially if you fast castled on 1 TC. As your eco grows, it becomes less of a lift to quickly gather the 350 stone and 400 wood and make a second TC. The extra villagers are always worth it. How to win in Castle. Winning in Castle is similar in a way to winning in Feudal, but there is some added complexity and I would argue some needed adjustments. 1. Raiding becomes even more important. As I said earlier, Castle Age is often when people have to be on resources on the map. Using your scouting to check these resources of units and hurting your opponent's eco is vital. 2. Embrace Siege. Look, Siege cannot be fun for sure, but often the people who invest in Siege first win. 2 mangonels and 2 to 3 springholds can win a fight that you should not have won. 3. Make a comp that is balanced and successful. Lean into your Civ strengths. Scouting here is vital. It is awful to attack an opponent with a comp of men-at-arms and crossbows, only to get rushed by a group of horsemen and then worked down by crossbows. It can have been avoided if you had just scouted. Often opponents will switch their comps multiple times in Castle, so make sure you adapt as well. 4. Add production. So often people don't realize how large their eco has gotten, and queuing up to 12 units in 3 production buildings. The person who can make the most units the fastest often wins. It's that simple. Now for the last section, frequently asked questions I've received in coaching about Castle Age. These answers will be heavily theory, as trying to create these examples in game and adjusting them for each civ would just take an insane amount of time. What I'm trying to do is to give you a starting point to think about these things and adjust it to your civ. I will also be slowly on my channel over time adding gameplay footage for specific situations that you can check out. For example, I just did one on running 2 TC against a fast castle, which you can watch here. So let's go through the questions. What do I need to achieve in Castle before aging up to Imperial? Imperial transition is similar in a way to Castle. Some people rush Imperial for better units, but sacrifice map control and resources for that. betting that they can break out with better military. Others go Imperial because both sides have been fighting for a while and no one can win, so you decide to go for the next advantage. Overall, though, I would say the best case scenario, you have completed the list of castle objectives I've given earlier. You have secured central resources of stone walls or keep. You've got your farm set up, and you have enough army to defend if attacked during the Age Up. It also depends if your Civ is really good Imperial Civ, or average. For example, when I play China, going Imperial is great for me. I get a lot out of it. So I feel if I have a chance to go Imperial, I will go for it. When I play Delhi, Imperial is very slow and not great. So I will overinvest in fighting Castle to avoid that if possible. Next question, how to plan ahead on resources so I stop floating them. Floating meaning you just have a lot of extra resources. It is very hard to not float resources. As you go through Castle, you start to get 70 plus villagers, and you will just get a lot of resources. The key is to view your base on a circular set of steps. First, always be adding villagers. 2, balance based on resources that you need to have or you have less of. 3, add farms. 4, add more production, and then repeat that process again. Generally, floating resources means you do not have enough production to make the units your eco can now support. Add more production and keep making units. Next question, when is a good indicator of when to leave Castle and go Imperial? This is similar to question 1. Generally, if you either get a huge boost from going Imperial for your Civ, or you've been fighting in Castle for a while and don't really see a great way to end the game, then going Imperial is your best bet. How do I keep up production in Castle Age? It's maintaining the macro cycle, but faster. Every free moment you have, you need to do the following. First, make villagers. 2, make military. Make sure you have your production hotkeyed so you're doing it quickly. 3, balance resources. And 4, scout and take military action. This will be slow at first, but as you do it, you will get faster and faster till it's something you do without thinking. But early on, you must actually think through it and do it. When to add TCs and scale up production. For production, just always be adding more production buildings. Like, I would rather you always have more production than not enough production. But for TCs, I would say there are a few things that will be key into adding more of them. Keep in mind, this does not apply to some civs with a lot of passive resources or certain landmarks. Example, HRE with the Swabia, Ottoman and Malayan with their passive resources or units, and Byzantine with the olive oil. If you went Castle on one TC, it's a great idea to add a second TC in Castle when you have a moment. Adding more villagers is a great way to start to get an eco lead as Castle continues, and even a small villager lead can be huge for your ability to overwhelm your opponent. If you took villager damage during Feudal or Castle and you need to catch back up. And lastly, if your opponent went 2 TC earlier and now you're trying to catch up, dropping 1 or even 2 more TCs is appropriate here. When do I farm transition? I would suggest if in long Feudal or early Castle, you need to slow add farms. What will often kill you is having all your food on the map run out at the same time and you're adding farms all at once. You'll get overwhelmed militarily if you are pushed. So my suggestion is you just start adding farms as you have extra wood. My go-to is to rally to wood as I enter Castle, and as I get extra wood, I either pull villagers from berries or sheep, or pull wood villagers and add farms. If you do it slowly over time, it ensures you never hit a bad food drop-off. What are the most important upgrades in Castle Age? First, of course, get veteran upgrades for the units you have a lot of. Do not get veteran upgrades for a unit you're not using. You can always get it later. Arrow defense. It is huge for fighting large amount of rage units or raiding under the TC. Get the farming upgrade, since farms are not great until you get those upgrades. Get the wood harvesting upgrade, which will just help with your farm transition and adding more production. And generally, any of your Civ's special upgrades related to your unique units or traits, such as the HRE men-at-arms upgrades, the English men-at-arms upgrades, or the Delhi keep upgrades to make them TCs. Use your Civ's advantages. I hope you found this video helpful. Castle is difficult, but you should not be scared. Like Feudal Age, it just takes reps and keeping in mind some general things you need to accomplish. As you do this, you will feel more and more comfortable with Castle Age and just do better in it in general. Good luck on your games.